Hey, how's it going? How's it going on this nice day? I'm just filming this introduction outside in my garden, and as you can tell, it's a lovely day outside. This video is going to be about the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration. I'm sure many of you know that the Queen, the sort of head of state in England, but also in my country, New Zealand as well, is celebrating her Platinum Jubilee this weekend. So I thought to celebrate Our Majesty's 70 years on the throne, I would do the top 7 books by British authors published during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. And I also will do a book for each decade, if that makes sense. So there's one in the 1960s, one in the 1970s, and so forth. The first book on my list is from the 1950s, and it is J.R.R. Tolkien's famous The Fellowship of the Ring, which was published in 1954. The Fellowship of the Ring, as you probably all know, is the first book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it essentially follows Frodo Baggins, the Hobbit, with his Hobbit friends Sam, Merry and Pippin. I can't really remember this. And as they travel out of their sort of Hobbit world into the wider world in order to help destroy the Ring of Power. The second book on the list is from the 1960s, and it is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, and that was published in 1964. I read this book as a kid, and I read it after I saw the movie, not the one with Johnny Depp, but the one in the 1970s with Gene Wilder. And reading the book was one of my first, shall I say, real kind of novels that I read. That and The Witches. And yeah, it was just amazing to me, this sort of storytelling and how it seemed so unreal but yet so realistic at the same time. Like, there were several moments where I actually identified with Charlie, and particularly like the moments he had with his family, and just that whole kind of wanting to get the golden ticket to see Willy Wonka. The 1970s, my favourite book in the 1970s is Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was published in 1979. I read this as an adult. I didn't think I would be into it because I knew it was a kind of sci-fi comedy book, and on the whole I'm not really into science fiction that much. I wouldn't say I'm totally against science fiction, but on the whole I would say it's not my favourite genre. But I really liked it. I really liked how funny it was, how there was like a really absurd quality to it. My favourite book published in the 80s probably has to be The Pillars of the Earth, which was published in 1989. Page number, but also in its scope. But at the same time it's very local. It just features around this kind of, I say small town, I don't know if it's quite a small town, might be considered a small city. And it's building of a cathedral or a church, and just the different characters and different sort of power plays and shenanigans that go on around it. My favourite book that was published in the 90s is Possession by A.S. Byatt. Like with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I saw the film first. The film was, I think, released in like the early 2000s, I think. It's set in two time periods. It's set in the modern day and it's set in the 1800s, and it's basically about this researcher in the modern day who discovers these sort of long lost letters connected with this famous author. And basically it's sort of like a literary detective novel where they try and find out who wrote the letters, who sent them, how's it connected with this famous author. And yeah, it just looks at sort of love and literature, and also to a certain extent a person's legacy and how that can be challenged later on. We are on to the 2000s now. We are on to the 21st century. This century, the Queen is still around, and my favourite book that was published in the 2000s was Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. It is basically about this kind of elderly teacher, so maybe in her 50s, maybe in her 50s, maybe in her 60s, who develops this friendship with this younger teacher. And basically, yes, a lot of stuff goes on from that, let's just say. It is very... It can maybe be a bit triggering because it does involve kind of like an older person having sexual relationships with a person younger than them, so it could be a bit triggering in that regard. It's just really is a book about friendship and obsession and what happens when, in a sense, a person wants something more out of another person than that person is willing to give. A favourite book of the 2010s is a little different in that it is a horror novel. I actually do like horror novels, but I don't actually read a lot of them. But the ones I've read I really do like, so I guess that is one goal for me, is to read more horror novels. Anyway, this one is The Ritual by Adam Neville, and it was published in 2011. And basically the novel is about four friends who, after a traumatic event in their lives, decide to go on one of the yearly vacations, like, you know, to the wilderness, you know, guy vacations, that kind of thing. And they decide to go on this expedition in Scandinavia. And everything is okay at first. They're doing like the trek and all that sort of stuff. And then one of them gets injured. One of them gets injured. So that puts a spanner in the works. And then another one suggests they take a shortcut. Now, you know, when someone suggests to take a shortcut in a horror novel, it usually doesn't end well. And that is definitely the case in this book. It is scary and freaky beyond belief. But also it's very... I found it quite relatable, especially in the depictions of the four guys and their friendship, but also that real sense of them feeling very afraid, that sense of doom, that things are not going to end well. This book is from the 2020s and it is a little bit different than the other books in that I actually haven't read this book, but it is a book that I would really like to read and get hold of. Hopefully I will read it this year, if not this year, then next year. The book that I would like to read is The Fortune Men by Nadifa Muhammad, and it was published in 2021. The Fortune Men is basically about this man in Wales in the early, sort of in the 40s and early 50s. He's a bit of a petty criminal and a bit of a rogue, as they would say, but he is in the end convicted of a convicted of a murder and sentenced to death in, I think, 1952, and he is one of the last men in Britain to get the death sentence. The major problem is he was actually innocent of the crime. And so this book, I think, charts his life and sort of how he got to the point where he was wrongfully convicted of murder. So it sounds like a very interesting read about a sort of period of time, an event I'd never heard of before. I'd never heard of this event before. Also, I'm a little bit worried it might be a bit emotional. Sort of like the whole idea of a man wrongfully imprisoned is yeah, can be is a sad story. But yes, that is the book I would like to read. So yes, those are my top 7 books. My top 7 books to mark the Queen's 70th Jubilee. And yes, and for all of those who live in Britain, I hope you guys had a wonderful time. And for all of you guys who are outside of Britain, again, I hope you had a wonderful time and a wonderful weekend. And I will see you next video.